Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. "Don't go into that house," shouted the homeless boy. The millionaire discovers the horror. In the city of Millersville, nestled in a quiet valley surrounded by green hills, night was falling slowly, like a velvet veil covering the slate roofs and cobbled streets. The old street lamps were coming on one by one, casting golden halos on the cracked sidewalks. The autumn wind rustled the dead leaves, and a smell of burnt wood hung in the air, mingling with the smell of damp ivy climbing the ancient facades. It was a city where time seemed suspended, where memories of the past still lived in the stones of abandoned houses. In this almost melancholic setting, a silhouette stood out, that of Marcus Bennett at 53. Marcus was the very picture of quiet success. Tall and well-built despite his years, his salt and pepper hair framed a face marked by experience, yet softened by a deep, kind gaze. Dressed simply, but always elegantly, he exuded a quiet confidence, that of a man who has nothing left to prove, but still much to offer. He had arrived in Millersville 6 months earlier, with no fanfare, no reporters, just a suitcase and a promise. A promise to himself that he'd build something real, far from the skyscrapers of Manhattan and the artifice of the business world. After making his fortune in green technology, he had left the circles of power to devote himself to what he called the silent scars of forgotten America. Millersville, with its tired streets, shuttered businesses, and resigned residents, represented a new struggle for him, a more intimate, more human one. He had set his sights on an abandoned Victorian house, atop a hill overlooking the city. Once majestic, the building had been abandoned for decades. Its slate roof was crumbling in places, the porch railings creaked in the wind, and the stained glass windows were broken, as if the house itself were mourning its past. Yet Marcus had seen something else. He had seen promise. A symbol. "It seems like she's been waiting for someone for a long time," he had told the old real estate agent as he signed the papers. "She deserves a second chance." Like this city. Since then, Marcus had invested in renovations, but also in the neighborhood. He funded a bakery run by a refugee couple, helped a local school reopen a library, and organized community meals in the park. Unlike the wealthy who parachuted in soulless projects, Marcus talked with people. He listened. He learned their first names. He wanted to understand what had broken this once prosperous city, marked by factory closures, mass immigration, and a profound sense of abandonment. The locals still looked at him with suspicion. Some thought he would leave in a few months, like everyone else. Others sensed a disturbing sincerity in him. But what Marcus didn't yet know was that this house he had chosen hid much more than dust and memories. Beneath its sleeping foundations, ancient secrets, buried by silence and fear, waited for a man like him to dare to awaken them. And October evening, the wind had risen earlier than usual, icy and capricious. It rattled the shutters of the old houses and made the dead leaves dance in disorderly swirls. The moon, veiled by thick clouds, cast a pale light on the deserted streets of Millersville. The footsteps of Marcus Bennett echoed on the wet cobblestones as he slowly walked up the hill, a paper bag in his arms, filled with warm bread, cheese and soup prepared by the small community kitchen he had recently funded. As he walked past the ruined houses, his gaze was caught by a curled-up silhouette in an old wooden porch. There, huddled against a collapsed column, was a boy of about 12 years old, obviously homeless. He wore a sweatshirt that was much too big for him, smeared with mud, and pants that were ripped at the knees. His shoes, too small, revealed frozen toes. His skin looked pale, almost gray under the dirt, and his black eyes were wide-eyed with a deep, almost animal fear. Marcus stopped dead in his tracks, touched by the child's distress. He approached gently, without any sudden movements, as one would with a wounded bird. "Hey, you look frozen," he said with a softness in his voice that, "Do you want to come and eat something? I have hot soup, bread, and there's even some hot chocolate." No sooner had he spoken than the boy jumped, as if the words themselves were a threat. He took a sharp step back, almost tripping over a broken step. Then, with a trembling voice, choked with panic, he shouted, "Don't enter this house. Please, don't go. Don't go in there." The tone of his voice was not a child's whim. It was a raw, visceral cry, the kind of fear you don't invent. Marcus froze. his heart suddenly heavier in his chest. The wind whistled through the bare branches of the trees, as if to emphasize the tension of the moment. He frowned and approached with measured steps. Why? What's going on? The boy looked around, his shoulders tense, as if afraid someone was listening. He moved halfway closer to Marcus, barely, just enough to whisper. There are things you shouldn't see there. I beg you, sir. This house, it's cursed. Marcus looked down at him, noticing the dark circles under his eyes, the dirt embedded in his nails, and authentic distress in every word. He knelt down, gently placing the bag at her feet. What's your name? Jamie. Jamie Brooks. My name is Marcus. Would you mind explaining what you know? I don't want to force you, but you seem to have seen things. Jamie hesitated for a long time. He bit his lower lip, then wiped a tear with the back of his dirty sleeve. His gaze wandered into space for a moment, as if reliving a memory he would have preferred to forget. There's a room. Down there. A room you can't see. I saw someone go in there, but I never saw that person come out. And it's not the first time. I heard things, screams, chains. Marcus heard a shiver ran down his spine. Every word Jamie said struck like a dull blow against a buried truth. He wanted to rationalize, to think it might be the imagination of a traumatized child, but nothing in Jamie's demeanor betrayed a fabrication. This wasn't a story. It was a confession. Have you ever tried to warn anyone? Jamie nodded bitterly. Nobody listens to me. I'm just a dirty kid sleeping on the streets. They tell me I'm making it up, but I know what I saw, and I can't keep it to myself if someone else goes in there. Marcus then felt something he hadn't felt for a long time. Fear mixed with immense responsibility. He had bought this house with dreams of renewal, of hope. But if within its walls lay a dark past and buried deeds, he knew he wouldn't be able to look away. He reached out to the boy. Jamie, I believe you. And I promise you, we won't let this continue. You are not alone. The boy looked at him for a long time, as if trying to guess if he was telling the truth. Then, slowly, he placed his dirty hand in Marcus's. That evening, after offering Jamie a clean cover, a bowl of still steaming soup, and a warm spot by the fireplace, Marcus couldn't get to sleep. While the young boy slowly fell asleep on the old sofa in the living room, lulled by the crackling of the fire and a fragile peace, Marcus remained awake, the haunted mind by the boy's words. After midnight, with a cup of coffee in hand, he opened his laptop, placed his glasses on his nose, and began Tozark the Millersville Digital Archives. But the newspapers were strangely silent about the house. Too silent. So the next morning, he made an appointment at the town hall. There, in the dusty archives of the old stone building, he met Mrs. Callahan, an elderly archivist with precise gestures and heavy silences. When he mentioned her home address, she paused. The Harwood House? She said in a slightly husky voice. Did you buy this property? Marcus nodded. She pursed her lips, hesitated, then pulled out an old, yellowed folder, secured with a linen rope. I shouldn't show you this. Most people prefer to forget. But if you found this boy, then maybe it's time someone knew. Inside the file, he discovered police reports never resolved. Young people who disappeared between 1954 and 1981, always in the immediate vicinity of the house. The name Harwood came back in the background, but the testimonies were vague and inconsistent. Several witnesses had recanted, others had left the city. A former servant had even claimed in 1963 that strange sand-muffled cries echoed beneath the foundations of the house. No report mentioned a thorough investigation. Back home, Marcus found Jamie sitting on the edge of the sofa, his arms around his knees, looking both fearful and resolute. Jamie, I think you're telling the truth. And I think this house hides secrets that Millersville has ignored for too long. The boy looked at him with fierce intensity, almost relieved that he no longer had to carry this burden alone. Do you want to see? He asked, his voice tense. Yes, but together. The next morning, the house was bathed in a pale light. Marcus and Jamie began their methodical exploration. They opened cupboards, inspected the rotten floors, and tapped on the walls. Then, when they reached the upper floor, Jamie stopped in front of a massive library embedded in a wall. It seemed strangely stable, as if she didn't belong at home. It's there. I'm sure it's there, Jamie whispered. He slid his hand over the bricks visible behind a gap, until he felt a stone colder than the others. He pressed it, and in a dull squeak, the bookcase moved back slightly, then slowly pivoted, revealing an narrow opening. A cold breath escaped from the darkness. A stone staircase spiraled down. Marcus switched on his flashlight, gave one to Jamie, then placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We'll go down together. If it gets too hard, tell me." Jamie nodded, his eyes bright but firm. The descent was long. The air was heavy, loaded with humidity and a heady metallic smell at the bottom of the stairs. A heavy wooden door reinforced with metal awaited them. Marcus pushed it slowly. It opened with a deep moan, like a sigh of pain. The revealed piece was cold and oppressive, carved from rough stone. The walls were oozing, and on the floor, scratch marks of the old stains brownish, and personal items abandoned littered the ground. A broken silver chain, of the crumpled letters, an old Mandiary-stained Asmal child's shoe. Jamie froze, his eyes wide, his flashlight shaking in his hand. "It's here?" I approached once, without entering. I recognized the smell. The cold. It's as if the house itself is trying to swallow me. Marcus knelt down and picked up a notebook, covered in dust and half-decayed. On the first page, a name scribbled, Clara G. Journal in Degree 2, dated 1978. Leafing through it, he read in a low voice. "They say I'm crazy, but I hear them. The voices beneath my feet. They cry at night. They told me to be quiet, but I can't. I can't." Marcus felt his heart pounding in his temples. He slowly sat up. "Jamie, why has no one ever discovered this?" The boy looked away, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Because they want to keep it secret," he murmurs. "Because those who knew turned a blind eye. Some were bribed. Others were too scared. But me, I don't have a home. I have nothing to lose. And I couldn't keep quiet anymore." At that precise moment, as Marcus was about to turn the next page of the old newspaper, a muffled crack broke the silence. Then another. Steps. Heavy. Slow. They echoed above them, somewhere in the living room. Jamie jumped, his face falling. "Someone is coming," he murmured, pale. Marcus turned off his flashlight and gently took the boy's arm. He led him to a dark recess behind a collapsed stone column, hidden by old, dusty blankets. There, silence became vital. They held their breath. The wooden door rumbled slowly, pushed back from the outside. Not precise, assured, entered the stone staircase. Then a figure appeared. Tall, elegant, dressed in a perfectly tailored three-piece suit. Henry Caldwell descended with an almost theatrical slowness, a glimmer of cruel amusement in his eyes. Behind him, two hooded figures, their faces hidden bismuth white masks, expressionless. Jamie was shaking all over. Marcus felt his nails digging into his sleeve. Caldwell stopped mid-stride, looking around the room like a master surveying his domain. "So," he asked icily, "Is everything ready for tonight?" The two masked figures nodded. One of them took out a notebook and crossed off a line. A heavy silence fell, as Eiffel itself had invaded the room. "Perfect. The ceremony will begin at midnight. The guests are not to be seen. We'll enter through the back, as always." Marcus felt his stomach clench. He had heard of Caldwell. Everyone in Millersville knew him. A man of power, an outstanding manipulator, always surrounded by scandals, but never worried. And now he saw it there, in the heart of something unimaginable. Jamie turned to Marcus, tears in his eyes, terrified. "It's him. It's him I saw that night. It's him who made them disappear." Marcus closed his eyes for a second. He knew what he had to do. He discreetly took out his phone, put it on silent, and wrote a quick message to the Captain Ramirez, police chief, an upright man with whom he had recently collaborated on a community project. Harwood House. Underground room. Illegal meeting in preparation. Henry Caldwell confirmed. Possible trafficking or cult. Absolute emergency. He pressed send. Barely 10 seconds later, the phone vibrated. A brief response. "Let's go." "Hold on." Time seemed to stretch like a taut thread. Caldwell circled the room, touching the walls, looking at the objects on the floor with grim detachment. "We need to clean up a bit. That damn kid must have been there. I smelled a recently turned-on lamp." One of the masked men nodded. "We found footprints. We'll search after the meeting." Jamie clapped his hand over his mouth. Marcus, seemingly calm but his heart pounding, slowly leaned toward him. "Don't move. It'll be okay." Then, finally, the sirens tore through the night, first distant, like a glimmer of hope, then closer and closer, until they surrounded the house. The silhouettes froze. "Shit," growled Caldwell. Someone has betrayed us. Hurried footsteps echoed upstairs. Voices shouted, "Police! Everyone down! Hands up!" Chaos ensued. Caldwell attempted to climb back up the stairs, but was confronted by armed officers in tactical gear. One of the masked men was wrestled to the ground. The other attempted to flee through a side hallway, but was intercepted in the backyard. Within minutes, the secret room was invaded by law enforcement. Marcus slowly came out of his hiding place, hands raised, followed by Jamie, still shaking but standing. Captain Ramirez strode down the steps, followed by 2 investigators. "Marcus? Are you okay? We saw it all. And Jamie heard it all. We must protect him. This boy risked his life to expose this horror." Ramirez nodded, looking around. His face hardened as he saw Caldwell, handcuffed, his gaze furious. "I've wanted that bastard for years. You've broken the circle of silence, Marcus." In the weeks that followed, the affair shook Millersville to its foundations. Dozens of names were revealed. Families recognized, through the objects found, the disappearance of their loved ones. The house was sealed off, then declared federal investigation site. But above all, a truth emerged, that of Jamie's courage. Marcus took Jamie into his legal custody. The child gradually found sleep again and returned to school. He became, in the eyes of the community, a symbol of truth and resilience. As for the Harwood house, it was not destroyed. Marcus decided to transform it into a museum of memory, a place where the stories of those who had been silenced were told. A plaque was placed on the front door. "To those who suffered in the shadows. To those who spoke out despite fear. May their truth guide our future." And every night, as he watched Jamie sleep peacefully in the guest room, Marcus remembered that exact moment, in the dark cellar, when a broken boy had whispered, "I couldn't keep it to myself any longer.